Just give me 1 minute to set up this one here. Okay. I don't know, all the time something they play with this one here. We'll see now. Okay, here we are. So this connection isn't playing well with this. Okay. Okay, I guess going to start now. I guess still I'm dealing a little bit, left a few things to finish with the Ascomycetes. Okay. Okay, I'm still with them. I'm just going to, okay, with the Asco, still I'm with the class Ascomycetes. Okay, and I talked with you basically the last thing I started with you, which called order the Callicipteris. Sorry. And basically the example we used here, Calvicipes purpurea. Already I mentioned to you last lecture that basically this is as when it happened, they do the sexual protection with this one here, it is a parathecial, okay? And already I think I mentioned this point to you here, that already I mentioned this point, okay? That about 27 genera, which include 270 species, okay? And also I mentioned that this order comprises a group of highly evolved and sophisticated obligatory parasitic fungi, okay? And also mention that this Calvicipes purpurea is the cause of what's called of ergot, okay? Called ergot of Ray, or of Rye, okay? Which is basically is the main host of that, okay? And infection takes place through the stigma, and then I'm going to continue with this. Okay, just give me a second here. Basically, that is, if we took for the example, this is, for example, the host species here. And this fungus, as a matter of fact, because this, yeah, you can see this one here, it infects from the stigma, and then the hive is going to go to the ovary of that flower of the, right? And then, of course, going to destroy the ovary, and then it's going to produce, it's what you call it's hyphae, but in the end, it produces what you call a mat. If you focus on this one here, you can see there is this mat of hyphae, and each one basically connected with a small conidia. Okay, but basically this mat of, in the end, also they have what you call, they produce like a sticky substance, and like the sugary thing, and that basically what happened here, in the end will form a hard crust around it, which is known as a sclerotia, like this one here, okay? But of course, when this sticky material, as a matter of fact, it will allow or attract more insect, and of course, whether insect or other thing comes, going to transport the conidia to other, what you call host species of the same. And then what happened here, going to explain that usually when the sclerotia is going to fall on the ground, is going. Now this sclerotia, because it's hard, and it's going to look like this one here. I don't know if I showed it to you last lecture. It's going to look like this of a color picture. That's how it looks like, the ergot. Look like this one here, okay? That's how it looks like. But of course, it contains a very kind of high alkaloid and is a very poisonous, okay? And as I mentioned to you, especially in the Middle Ages or before that, which people were not aware of it, they will make a braid or anything which is included with this ergot, and of course will cause them a devastation, as I'm going to explain some what happened later on, because what happened, this alkaloid can constrict the veins, and of course when constrict the veins, plus other effect has. But when constrict the vein, of course, in that case, no blood will come, and you find later on, basically either the fingers or the arm or the leg is going to rotten and fall off. And basically, there is a lot of a very grisly detail out what it used to be. But plus also the people who eat it, they feel like their stomach is burning, okay? And also it also introduce hallucination and so on. But basically, I'm going to talk about a little bit about this species here, okay? So already I mentioned to you that Calvicipes, already I mentioned that to you, that Calvicipes purpurea, because of ergot of Rye, and infection takes place through the stigma. Now, to continue after that, okay? Now, when the ascospore, just to make sure that you are seeing here, okay? When the ascospore, okay, germinate, okay, send a germitube, okay, into the ovary. Of course, to the ovary of the flower, to the ovary, okay, and cause infection. and cause infection. And basically, as this is ovary here, and as the mycelium growth is going, of course, is going to destroy it. Okay, and as the mycelium develops, okay, it destroys the ovary. Okay, the ovary tissue or tissues here, okay, and replace them in the flower. Okay, place them in the flower. Okay. By soft, white, okay, cottony, mycelial mat. Mycelium, which soon become okay, covered, okay, with a hard crust. Okay. Of course, that in the end going to harden and become the sclerotia. But usually, what you call to mention here now, usually going to mention here that the mycelium, okay, bear minute or small, as I showed you, conidia. Okay. And as I mentioned, these conidia are mixed, okay, with a sticky, sweet secretion. Okay, that attract insects which spread the conidia. Okay, to other host or to other means to the same. Okay. Of course, of the same species. Okay. Later on, of course, as I mentioned, that mycelia with the crust, later on when it's going to be hardened, now we call it what you call the ergot, okay? And to mention this point here, now, the mycelial mat, the mycelial mat, okay, hardens and become, okay, or becomes purplish, okay, and also sclerotia, okay, becomes purplish, sclerotia. Okay, and that basically that the hard term, that is which we call it the ergot, between two brackets, that which is known as the ergot. Okay, and that organ basically is going to become at the end replaces the grain, because as I told you, when the fungus infect from the stigma, then the mycelia is going to go all to the ovary, destroying the ovary, and then the mycelia at the tip is going to show what you call with the conidia, with the sticky material for this, and that's basically going to replace what you call the grain. And to mention to you which replaces the grain. Did you follow that? Okay, now, when this ergot later on fall to the ground, okay, when it falls to the ground, later on is going to germinate and going to produce a structure. It looks like a mushroom-like structure, but not a mushroom, okay, which is like this one here. Did you see this one here? Just going to show it to you. Now, this is the ergot here I showed to you here. When it produced, okay, yeah. Now, when it's going to fall to the ground, it's going to germinate and it's going to produce a structure like this, which have a stroma. And basically, if we focus on this stroma, each one of these is a parathecia. You follow that? Each one of these basically, of course, after what you call basically unification between two strain, sexual reproduction, and meiosis, is going to produce what you call that kind of parathecia, which also has an opening here. Okay, I don't know if in the lab they showed you a slide or a picture like this one here, and you can see these filiform here. These the filiform here, it looks basically are the ascospores. Okay, so basically that is how it's going to. This simply I'm going to talk about. I'm not describing the life cycle, but at least describing when the secretia fall to the ground and is going to produce that stroma structure, which looks like a mushroom, but inside basically we have the parathecia, and within it is the ascospores. Okay, to mention this point here now. Yes. Now. Then the ergot, which we call that hard one, okay? If it fall to the ground, okay, then germinate, okay, in the following spring, okay, to form or produce what you call several long stalked, okay, mushroom-like okay, called mushroom-like, okay, stromata, as I showed you with the globose head. with the globose head. And as I mentioned it, then after, put it here, after sexual fusion, completed, okay, several, okay, parathecia will develop, okay, within the stromatal head. Okay. And to mention basically now here that each of these each parathecium, okay, contain several elongated, as I showed to you, asci, each with 8, okay, 8 thread-like ascospores. Okay. So, okay, simply going to say, as I showed you here, again to mention that stromatal, because it has a tissue, and that's called like stroma, like a bed, stromatal tissue here, and that is the stock one or tissue here. And these are, as you can see, these are the parathecia, and inside, as a matter of fact, each one of these thread hair, what you call ascospores. Of course, each of these parathecia has an opening here in which basically is going to allow the ascospore to spread out, okay? So basically this is a general about what you call about the organism here. As I told you basically that this sclerotia or the ergot contain many alkaloid. I'm going to talk a little more detail when I talk about the toxicity and production by some fungi. But at the moment, I just mention a few points here, okay, that large number of alkaloids okay, found in the ergot. Okay. And just to mention the other point, of course, that human consumption okay, of rye bread, okay, with ergot, or even the animal, if they eat it, also the same thing is going to affect them, huh? With the ergot. As I mentioned, basically, to continue after this, okay, cause poisoning, and we call this poisoning ergotism. occultism, or sometimes we call what you call the commonly used to known as Saint Anthony fire. Of course, at the time they used to think other things here, but basically it makes inside it feel like it's burning. Okay, occultism, which is basically known as Saint Anthony fire. Okay, the reason why, which result, okay, also in hallucination. And of course, the person also feel like basically they are basically burning, okay, and feel that they are burning. Okay. And also some of these alkaloid of the organic automation, basically it will serve as a very, what you call, very strong or lethally, what you call, kind of psychological drugs called LCD, okay? And just to mention to you here that another species, okay, of Calvacipes, okay, as the prime source, which is known as of LSD. Which is basically as abbreviation to lysergic acid, okay, diethylamide. Okay, which is, as I mentioned, one of the most, okay, powerful, okay, called cyclic, this is P here, cyclic drugs. As I said, we're going to talk about this when I talk a little bit more and to explain what you call the type of the alkaloid and so on, okay? You follow this? So basically, by this one, basically, I mentioned to you about 2 or 3 examples of the mushroom of the Ascomycete, which produce perithecia. The first one I mentioned, of course, is the, what you call, the bread, the one I mentioned to you here is the, what you call, the stroma or the perithecia of stroma, I guess, of the neurospora. And also we mentioned about the example of schutimum, and also we mentioned about this one here. Now we're going to move, of course, to the last group of the Ascomycete, in which, of course, during their sexual production, they produce what you call the apothecia or the apothecium. Okay? Now, so basically this one called here, subtitle, the Upofficial Ascomycete. Okay? And sometimes, of course, we call them Discomycete because the apothecia, as you know, basically, in which simply after the sexual production, they produce what you call like this one here, in which, as you can see here, because it's open, And of course, this is a tissue here. And if you could focus, each one of these contain the ascus, and inside it is the ascospore. And between them, of course, sometimes there is some hyphae, which didn't develop an ascus. We call them sterile hyphae, or we give them the name as paraphyses. Okay, already I mentioned to you. And because all the ascus lying in one layer like this, of course, as you mentioned, we call this a hymenium or hymenial layer. Okay, so in this one, we're going to have some example on this one here of the upofficial fungi. Okay, just one thing that we need to remind ourselves, of course, that the apothecia okay, of most species of most species which produce this type here are cup-shaped, okay, are cup-shaped, okay, or saucer-shaped. Okay. With the ascus, okay, exposed. It's not like, okay, exposed. In a hymenial layer. Because all the ascus is one section. Okay. The majority of these species of the which form the what you call this apothecial, most of them are saprophic, very few are parasitic. To mention this point, the majority of apothecial ascomycetes, and because sometimes also we call them discomycetes because they form that like a disc, okay? Known also as discomycetes, so that you know it just in case here, okay? Are saprobic. Okay? Are saprobic. But if you, as I mentioned to you, are parasitic, okay, some of these parasitic causing, okay, disease known as brown rot, okay, of stone fruits. The stone fruit basically like the pears and others. We call it stone fruit because you see the stone fruit sometimes if you have eat a pear or something like that, also sometimes they have what you call these sclerenchyma chisel, okay, because they have special cell of this one, okay, or stone fruit here, okay, and some of these like this, but the most one also they cause also basically in peaches, okay, to mention here, and probably the most serious of these fruit diseases and the most serious disease also of peaches. Okay. Now I'm going to make examples. Going to okay. One of these examples, which is the species, is known as Pisaza. Okay. Which is simple as the one I showed you here. Pisaza basically produce that one. Like this one, the one Pisaza. Okay. The Pisaza basically we call is a classic. Cup fungi producing, okay, Upofficial Ascomycete. Okay, producing Upofficial Ascomycete. That are usually, okay, shaped, as I showed you here, more like saucers. Okay. Okay, now maybe some other example. I don't know, I have some, just in case if I find some of these, maybe just give me a second. Yeah, well, it's just when it comes to yeah, well, and I think I showed you in the beginning here, but still, okay, anyway. Which in here, okay. Oops. And also to mention, and usually, they are usually without stock. Okay. And found growing on wood and also dung or soil. Okay. Now, the other example I'm going to give you of this one here is the Morchella. Morchella, some people, they call them false mushroom, but they are not, okay? Sometimes, usually these, they look like this one here, Morchella. They look like this one here, okay? Yeah, okay? And because in reality, what happened here, if you look at each of these cavity here, each one of these basically, those look like this one here, but each one of these basically is an Ascomycetes, okay? With epithecium, each one of these. If you take a cross section, they're going, or a linguist like this, okay? They're going to look like this one here. that if this is the shape like that one here, basically, and if you take this one here, it's going to look just, this is a very rough drawing like this. Okay, and inside it basically you can see all the S side, and inside it the ascospore in each of these groups. Supposedly, most of these Morcilla, they are edible, okay? But normally I would never advise anybody to eat something unless very experienced, okay? And they say that always they are very delicious of them. So, okay? And just to put this on here, Morcilla species, okay? These is one, Morcilla is just one of the finest, okay? Edible fungi, okay? And as I will show it to you here, that species of Morcilla, okay, have a broad to hollow stalk, okay, and pitted and rigid, called sponge-like, okay, and simply going to mention, of course, more or less, okay, ellipsoidal, okay, with ellipsoidal, or conical head, okay. The other example in which also they include what you call the SI in the form of apothecia is basically the truffle. You hear of truffle, but usually the truffle, of course, is a common name. It is under the genus tuber. Just to mention the other example here. Okay, one mention here, that. Okay. As a tuber, which is simply known as, basically commonly as the truffles. Okay, we'll talk about it a little bit here. Okay. Of course, the truffle basically they are produced under the ground, and that's basically the smell sometimes allows some animal to dig them out, and basically that is the way they separate it. No. The SI of truffle, to mention here, the SI, okay, of the truffles, okay, are produced okay, in a highly convoluted hymenium, okay, are rounded, okay, and thin-walled. Okay, just give me a second here. Okay. As you can see, these are basically, if you have seen some of the truffle, how it look like, this is black and white here, but inside, of course, either it look like this one, and inside, of course, this is how it look inside the ascus with the ascospores here, okay? But as I mentioned, they have no mechanism to disperse unless, of course, when they produce that odor, and well, the animal dig them, or even sometimes a human dig them, and by this access basically allow them to mention this point here. Okay, thin wall, okay, with no, okay, with no opening or other, okay, shooting mechanism. And as I mentioned to you, and usually contain, as a matter of fact, only a few ascospores. Sometimes could be 3 or less, okay? As already I mentioned to you, basically, that these fungi okay, produce special odors or odors when the ascospores are mature. They produce special odors when the ascospore is mature. Okay, which basically that odor which leads many mammals okay unearthing for the ascomat. And of course, by doing this, of course, they are getting it, okay? Of course, as you know, truffle sometimes people, some of them are very, what you call, edible, and some of them are delicacy. And of course, the top of these, which is known as what you call, I think they call the black diamond. And of course, there is a lot, but because sometimes very difficult to, though there are some Italian and French scientists, they try to grow them, but they couldn't succeed to grow them. You have to take that from the soil because sometimes they never know in which basically they are doing mycorrhiza and which species, okay, and that's why. And of course, the black diamond considered, and some of them I think very expensive, okay. I think some of them sometimes they reach to about $1,000 or so. Okay, to mention a little bit here, other species of truffle, other species of truffles. Okay. Such as the black diamond, okay, which is as known as the queens of the truffles. Truffles, okay. To mention each one, simply they are, okay, and is dependent not only on sorry, on mammalian vectors, okay, but also on the roots, okay, of oak and hazelnut trees. Trees. Simply going to mention here, of course, establishing symbiotic ectomycorrhizal relationship. Ectomycorrhizal. I'm continue here. Ectomycorrhizal. You see this one here? Called ectomycorrhizal relationship. That means the hyphae of this basically they grow on the outside of the root. Okay. The last thing I'm going to mention basically of this class Ascomycetes is basically just a little bit about one order. It's not very, it is important from academic point of view, but basically this is, though it is a large order, but mostly lives inside the animals and of insects and so on. This is called the order basically, what we call Lobulonialis. Just the last order I'm going to talk about here called order. Okay. Linealis. Okay. Simply going to mention to you here, okay, that this order is a very, this is a very large order or large group, okay, of minute, okay, but they are very specialized fungi that, for example, they could choose between, say, the male rather than the female insect, something like that. And really, if somebody goes to any, what you call, ants places, usually they are, you find some of them there, to mention to you here, okay? It's a very large group of minute, okay, as I mentioned, very specialized. Okay, fungi. Okay, mostly as I mentioned, on insects. Okay. Insect is mentioned here. Okay. Now, just to give you an idea about this one here, okay? Such as ants. Okay, if one basically goes to any ant hill, basically the ground, usually they are there, but as I said, they are very specialized. Okay, now just to have a few lines on this one here, that basically these fungi produce, okay, their asci, okay, in cavities. Okay, cavities. Or in mattress shaped structure. Okay, and often, okay, only a single locule is produced. Okay. Now this one, you just give me a second here. They grow something like that, okay? That's how they grow. Sometimes they have a very short, even mycelia or something. So basically, I'm just explaining that this group of order or this group of order, basically they are a large group, but mostly they are what you call infecting insect, and some of them are very specialized, choosing, of course, either male or female and so on, just to give you an idea about this group, but also they belong to the Ascomycete. By mentioning this, basically, I will end up that class of the Ascomycete. Now going to move to the other class or the subphylum of what you call Dicardiomycota, basically is the Basidiomycetes. Okay. Here. Okay. Basically, now we have this phylum because, as I mentioned to you in the beginning of this, we have this phylum, the Dicardiomycota, in which we have basically two subphylum, in which we have one was the Ascomycotina, or the class Ascomycete, and basically that class basically, as already mentioned to you, that the characteristic of this group that when plasmogamy occur, then that stage of the two nuclei is going to last for a long period. It could be a year or more or less a little bit. And even what happened, these hyphae, as already mentioned, that with the two nuclei can produce more hyphae with two nuclei. And when meiosis will occur, then of course we will have two groups. If the meiosis occur and then after meiosis they produce the sac or the ascus with ascospores, all this group belongs to the Ascomycete. Or the other group we're going to talk about, in which basically after meiosis, they produce like a cell, and from that cell, they produce the spore. And normally we call that cell as a basidia from a base, and of course, this spore known as the basidiospore. So basically, as I mentioned, these fungi, when they do the meiosis, later on, they produce something like this, okay? they produce them when meiosis occur. Of course, the cell then produce a cell like this, and then at the end, what you call the 4 spores will pop out here. Okay, so basically, then we call this cell as the base cell. We call them the basidia or basidium as singular, and of course, what you call, and then we call these as a basidiospore. Of course, you have this is the stigmata, and this. So basically, all these fungi basically in their sexual reproduction, they produce the basidia with basidiospores, but the way we are going to group them is a little bit different from that, from the Ascomycete. Now, this group basically, we're going to group them basically on the shape of the basidia. Okay? For example, some of them, they will have the basidia all one cell. In this case, we call them the holobasidiomycetes. Okay? Some basically, they produce the basidia is fragmented and 2 cell or 3 cell, okay? In that case, we call that group phragmobasidiomycete. Or some other produce different type of 2 cell, we call them teleo or teleomycete. We explain all that here. But of course, in the beginning also, they have some general characteristic. And as you know, the one of the major group belongs to this group, basically all the mushroom belong to this group, okay? So basically also this is a very important group. So we're going to talk about this one here, in which, as I mentioned to you, with this phylum Dicardiomycota. And of course, we have the subphylum now. Which is known as Basidiomycotina. And of course, we have the class is going to be the Basidiomycete. Okay. So I'm going to start basically some of the general characteristics of this group. Okay. Of course, as I mentioned to you, basically all this group, they produce all these kind of fungi here. Okay. Like this one, all that, they produce all these kind of, so it's a very large group going to mention to you here. Okay. So we're going to about, of course, as I mentioned in one of the line, they comprise or include some of the most common okay. Okay, some of the most common and fungi such as or including mushrooms, okay, puffballs, okay, and also which is known as the shelf fungi, okay, and also earth stars and so on. Etc. Okay. Now the other characteristic, of course, that the major unification, of course, as I mentioned to you here, and just to mention about this one here. Now the major unifying feature of the entire group, to mention this, the major unifying feature of this group, or of course of this entire group, of this group here, okay, is the existence of the basidia as the base cell, of course, called basidia. And of course, if you call it, this is basidia, usually is the plural. If you put one, in that case, basically is what you call basidium, okay? Or basidium as singular. Okay. Basidium. And upon which, to emphasize this point here, upon which, okay, the sexual spores in this case, of course, are known as the basidiospores. In which the sexual spores, which is the basidiospores, okay, are formed. And of course, I mentioned always, of course, after meiosis. Okay. After meiosis, and also to mention for terminology, and each basidiospore is born on stigmata. Okay. There are other two characters of this group here. The other character, also what you call these cells in which meiosis occur, they've developed between themselves a connection like a clamp, and that's we call the presence of the clamp connection. Okay, I will show it to you here. Even sometimes you see it here. Okay, this cell, this is called clamp connection. Do you see it? Okay, explain this one. Or sometimes it shows like this one here. Or like this one. Okay, this is known as clamp connection. We're going to talk about it just a minute here. Now, very simple, going to mention another microscopic feature. Of this group basically is, as I mentioned to you, is known as the clamp connection. Connections produced, okay, in the dichoritic mycelia, in the dikaryotic mycelia, means the mycelia which contain the two nuclei, mycelia, okay, during cell division. During cell division, of course, only one group they don't produce it. Apart from one group of these species called Teleomycete. Of course, you don't know it now, but I will explain it later on to mention to when it comes to this, okay? Except the teleomycetes. The teleomycete, basically, they are a group of the basidiomycete, okay? Now, this is one character, basically, as I mentioned to you, the production of what you call of the clamp in this Dicardiomycota. Now, there is also a third character, which is basically regarding the pore, because you see, what it shows to you here, okay? Okay, now, this is basically as a cell to show you the difference. This is a cell, and basically here you have basically, as a matter of fact, the septa. Now, of course, some septa, basically, for example, in Ascomycete, there is a pore, and that pore which allow the material to move from one cell to another cell. Okay. Now, what happened in the Basidiomycete? In the Basidiomycete, that pore is a little bit swollen and become like a drum shape. Okay, and we have two types of this. So basically, as you can see, this is the Basidiomycete here, and as you can see, this is the septa, and basically when you have the pore here, is circulating with these pore. So basically, these are the characteristic in which also the Basidiomycete will show. Okay, and also a part, of course, the teleomycete, sometimes they don't show that. Just to explain this point here. Now, because the time is okay. To mention it all. Now, the septa of the most Basidiomycetes. Okay, as I mentioned to you, are swollen. Okay, they are swollen and centrally perforated and centrally perforated with a hole here. Okay. I want to mention also, however, most of the Basidiomycetes okay, the septa, okay, have a central barrel-shaped structure is called, as a matter of fact, we call it dolipore, called a dolipore. A dolipore, okay. However, except in teleomycetes, which is also the other group here, okay. The septal pore, okay, blocked by known as polywheel occlusion. Called polywheel occlusion.
Could you look at the page?
Okay.
Thank you.
Well, occlusion, because it looks like this one here. You see now? Just give me a second here before that will end up, but you can see it here. Okay, just left 1 minute here. That is in teleomycete. This is the pore and covered like this one, and that we call it occlusion. Okay, so by this, basically, I will end my lecture. And then in next lecture, I'm going to start by the shape of the basidia, because based on that, we have the different group, okay? Do you follow lecture okay?
Yes.
Okay, because I can still hear you from my computer here, even if this one is closed, okay? All right. How do you find your exam?
Thought it was pretty fair.
Okay, thank you. Well, anyway, it takes me a while to correct it, okay? Because you are not a smaller group, huh? Anyway, that's the end. Well, have a good day.
Thank you.
You want